I want to cast your mind back to January last year. We had the beginnings of a US, let's face it, coup in Venezuela, where they were trying to install somebody that only 18% of Venezuelans had actually ever heard of.
Absolutely, yeah.
You stood up on the side of truth, because what I had found out during that period, and something that you were on the BBC, I remember telling a member of your own party, putting them straight, that actually their elections are one of the best and most unriggable in the world, and President Jimmy Carter was actually the person who would, he was the
election observer there.
The election observer, and he was a sort of a charity, and he said it was one of the best elections ever he had seen.
Chris, is it your position that Nicolas Maduro should stay as president?
Well, whatever my position is, in many ways is irrelevant, because
we'd like to know that.
Well, hold on. Let me just say this though. It's not for us. It's not for the UK. It's not for the United States of America to determine who should be the government in Venezuela. There was an election, and Rachel said it was a rigged election, but election observers refute that. Indeed, previous elections in Venezuela have been declared the safest elections anywhere in the world by no less than Jimmy Carter, who has an election observatory, as you probably know. But the issue is about the sanctions in Venezuela that have been imposed by the United States. They're basically crippling the economy there. And there's a UN rapporteur who said that the sanctions are illegal and could amount to crimes against humanity.
You got up and you were talking about how the UK had withdrawn, I think, £1.2 billion in Venezuelan gold, and it was Venezuelan gold, it was mined in Venezuela that we're holding from them. And you asked, I think it was Alan Duncan at the time, if the Venezuelan people had the right to self-determination around the world and whether he supports it. And he called you not even a pound-shot commie.
This week, I asked a question of Alan Duncan, who's the Minister of State for Europe and the Americas.
So can the Minister explain why the double standards? Is it that he's wanting to facilitate another humanitarian catastrophe, as we're seeing in Yemen with British arms? Does he want to see the same in Venezuela? And does he not support self-determination of peoples around the world rather than intervention from Western powers?
I've got to say, I found his response an absolute disgrace.
My right honourable friend, the member for Mid Sussex, referred to Poundland Lenins. I have just seen in this House one who isn't even worth a penny, let alone a pound. I recognise when I see it, as do people on the other side of this House, unreconstructed ideological nonsense when they see it. He is a throwback, and it brings shame. Indeed, I'm astonished he's even been prepared to show his face in this House today.
This is where I started feeling that the knives were out for you at this point. How did you feel getting called that by the members of the opposition and not getting any support from your own members of the party?
Well, yeah, I was going to say it's a bit of a badge of honour really to be referred to. I think he was quoting one of the Nicholas Soames had referred to, I think, John McDonnell as a pound shop Leninist, and he said we've just heard this morning from somebody who's not even worth a penny, let alone a pound.
That's right, yeah.
But no, what was disappointing was, I have no problem with the Tories attacking me. I mean, obviously, if the Tories are attacking you, you must be doing something right. What was disappointing was that the jeers were as loud, if not louder, when I was making some of those points, when I was quoting the UN Special Rapporteur, who had...
Alfred Desires.
Alfred Desires, absolutely, yeah. And he'd said that, for example, the sanctions that were being imposed by the states were, in his view, illegal under international law and potentially bordered on crimes against humanity. And I'm trying to make some of these points and trying to set the whole thing in context. It's not to say that Venezuela is perfect. I mean, no country is. They've made mistakes. I think they would acknowledge that. But to have this one-eyed view about what's happening in Venezuela is totally unacceptable, in my opinion. And what was disappointing, really, as I say, was not so much the reaction of the Tories. I quite enjoy, winding up the Tories, I've got to say, but it was a reaction from, if you like, my own benches, who were just as voluble in their criticism of the position that I was taking.
That is really, see, that's the thing that was most troubling for me. You touched that, and that you expect your opposition, they're over there to oppose you. You don't expect your enemies to come from the people behind you, but it seems that that's the situation. I mean, the Venezuela situation, as I stated, they've made, as you say, mistakes, there's no doubt about that, but you mentioned no one-eyed view. To look at it through the only angle being, oh, socialism's bad and he's spent all the money and he's done everything wrong and there's corruption, that's wrong. Same as looking at it through the eye of, oh, well, it's just the sanctions from America that have caused this. You know, it's just the pressure that the IMF have been putting on, etc., etc. You have to look at it all in a collective. You have to look at all of the bits of information to get a proper view of it. And what I view Venezuela as is sort of a country that's trying to do what Labour was trying to do. They were trying to socialise the grassroots and trying to get people to work.
They've done an incredible job, and indeed, when I was going around the country, and indeed I still do, and speaking at various meetings, and certainly as part of the Democracy Roadshow that I was doing to try and encourage democratisation of the Labour Party, I quote some of the achievements that the Venezuelan government had made, and if you think about it, when Chavez came to power, I think in 1998, it was in a parlous state. Its GDP was lower, I think it was, than it was in 1998 than it was, I think, in 1964. The country was absolutely, well, not just stagnating, it was going backwards.
Illiteracy was off the childbirth was at deaths.
But they made huge strides. I mean, they eliminated illiteracy in a few short years. I think by 2005 it had been basically eradicated in Venezuela. He set his stall out on education, on healthcare, huge improvements, massive reductions in poverty, huge improvements in the quality of housing. And one of the things that they did after the unsuccessful coup against Chavez in 2002 was to embark upon a process of political education, both in the military, and started recruiting people from the barrios. And they established a sort of network of citizen militias, and this was one of the things I was saying, we could learn a lesson or two, because despite all of the pressure that's been piled upon them by the United States and the elites in Venezuela, the extreme violence that's been meted out at the behest of the far right and the elites in Venezuela, aided and abetted by the United States as a line in the federal budget specifically for funding these right-wing groups in Venezuela. Despite all that, the government still enjoys popular support amongst ordinary working class people in Venezuela, and I think part of the reason for that is through these militias and so on, and they've kind of politicised the wider general public in that sense. And I was saying we could learn a lesson or two from that. I wasn't suggesting that we had armed militias in Britain, but I think in terms of building a mass movement and politicising the wider general public, it's absolutely crucial. And one of the reasons why I would believe that was important was that were we to have succeeded in electing a Corbyn-led Labour government committed to a modest, let's be honest, a modest socialist programme, that there would be enormous pressure on them. And we know when not long after Jeremy was elected as leader, a serving general gave quotes to the Times newspaper talking about them not tolerating a Corbyn-led Labour government cutting defence spending or scrapping Trident or withdrawing from NATO, and that he said he would use fair means or foul to prevent that. Now that's treason.
Yeah.
And so it was clear that there would be enormous pressure. Who knows? Maybe even the attempt at a military coup. And on that basis, I believed, and still do, if we are ever to get a socialist government in this country, that we'll need a mobilised and motivated working class to come out onto the streets to defend that Labour government. Not to indulge in violence, but just to kind of be there to demonstrate there is mass popular support for the sort of programme that a Corbyn Labour, or indeed whoever it comes in the future, a socialist, modest socialist programme in Britain will need that popular support in order to survive.